Lesson E2, Prejudice and Discrimination. In this lesson, we talk about less obvious forms of group inequality in our society. We've seen that individuals can be unequal in terms of their wealth and prestige, and in terms of their power, their ability to get what they want, due to either coercive force, social influence, or a status of authority. But at the macro level, we see that our society has a larger stratification between unequal status groups. These include classes, between which social mobility is potentially open based on achieved wealth or work. But racial group and gender and other socially constructed categories may be stratified as well. When social mobility is fully closed, an individual's ascribed status group may form a caste whose social roles and opportunities are fixed by society's formal norms. In most industrial societies, old agricultural caste systems have been thrown out, yet we see stratification between these groups continuing. Prejudice is biased against people based on their perceived status group. Prejudice blinds us to the realities of individual variation and potential. It is a matter of belief of group stereotypes or differing value. For instance, ageist prejudice may lead someone to believe that older people are weak and senile. Discrimination is action that often grows from that belief, from different treatment to outright violence. One's prejudice about older job applicants may lead to discrimination by refusing to hire them. Discrimination takes many forms, and according to the Alport scale, begins at the level of symbolic portrayal of prejudice against an outgroup. Next is a passive avoidance of an outgroup, and then active discrimination against them. Violence may come about in the form of hate crimes or even genocide, often in response to their deviation from perceived social roles. Discrimination occurs at both micro and macro levels. Individual discrimination is most familiar to us, but structural or institutional discrimination can be much more damaging, as it is built into larger social structures. Discriminatory formal norms in the institution of government were largely abolished by first-wave feminism and civil rights. But informal norms of government agencies, such as racial profiling, may still exist. Such problems may be dealt with by stricter enforcement of existing bureaucratic rules. But outside of government, private organizations as well may discriminate, and changing those norms may require increasing the scope of government authority. We saw last time that women working full-time make less on average than men working full-time. Some of that is due to job choice, but it's important to remember that many employers discriminated against women until fairly recently. It's also important to ask why traditional woman-dominated jobs, sometimes called pink-collar work, pay less to begin with. Second-wave feminism worked to eliminate disadvantage in private organizations, requiring equal pay and opportunity and making gender discrimination a crime. It also worked to change government laws that weren't explicitly sexist yet still blocked opportunities for many women. Most notably, this included the right to control their own female reproductive systems and prevent pregnancy being used against them. The most well-known civil rights movement in recent American history was the fight for racial equality in the middle of the 20th century. It brought an end to legal segregation by making the argument that so-called separate but equal opportunities for minority groups were rarely equal to those given to dominant groups. It also fought for an end to segregation in marriage and government enforcement of equal rights to votes, jobs, housing, and even immigration from non-European countries. Homosexuality, or same-sex preference, and heterosexuality, or different-sex preference, had only been recognized as distinct sexual orientations in this country since the 19th century, but the first wave of gay rights made major changes in only the last generation. Because their status could be more easily hidden, gays and lesbians' initial fight was just to be open about their lifestyle, and then for the same family rights enjoyed by straight couples. While homophobic prejudice has decreased even faster than some sexism, legal protections against private discrimination have come up against First Amendment rights to certain perceived religious beliefs. If you want to understand prejudice, the first step is to recognize the many different groups who may suffer from it. This includes ascribed statuses, which nearly everyone may be labeled during their lifetime, such as age or disability, and those that only affect some members of a society, such as minority, racial, ethnic, national groups, and sex and gender. Even statuses that we may achieve during our lifetime may be an identity that biases others' perception of us. Where did these prejudiced ideas begin? In-group identity and out-group distance may be the obvious beginning. Those that we identify with and have primary relationships may form our norms, and ethnocentrism may lead us to further distance ourselves from those we see as deviant. Once prejudice, stereotypes, and discrimination become normal to us, we begin to pass them on as part of our culture, and even allow selection bias to find justifications in our traditions and beliefs. The Christian Bible was long used as an excuse for racism and sexism. Informational conformity leads to internalization of these ideas, assimilating them into our own personality. We may even internalize negative ideas about ourselves, changing our looking-glass self, and potentially alienating us from our own in-group. Prejudice is difficult to measure, but implicit association tests have shown that most people indeed show some bias, even if they are not conscious of it. I encourage you to learn something about yourself at this link. However, some people show a much more extreme form of prejudice, often against many groups at once. Psychologists point to certain authoritarian personality traits. Some people show extreme ethnocentrism and a firm belief in their own rightness and importance over anyone viewed as weak or inferior. The most important question may be how we respond when we see someone else discriminating. Do we step forward or stand by and let it happen? The bystander effect may be caused by informational conformity, assuming there's something other than prejudice causing the behavior, or perhaps by normative conformity, not wanting to stand out and put ourselves on the line by being a whistleblower.